Biden's falling polling points. What can we do to help him? You now have someone who his um, his run for the White House. But you also have Robert Kennedy. You have Cornel West, who'll be on with us next week. You have a lot of people who I mean, you have a growing body of people who are saying, "I think we need an alternative," and I want to know what your thoughts are. What do you think should happen? I want you to meet Linear Bob and Ashley King and everybody over on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and on the Santita Jackson and Friends page, and let's talk about it. Let's talk about these protests. You just saw tremendous protest at it against a flight that came in from Tel Aviv in Russia. But you're also seeing protests where you're seeing tens of thousands in the United States, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, are marching all across the world. They want a ceasefire and they want justice for the Palestinians and they want security for the Israelis. And how are we going to get there? We've got to get there. It seems that this ground war has grown. So why? When most people in the world want a ceasefire, how is that going? And then there are news reports that the people who are making the money are the folks who always make the money, the munitions industry. Think about that, everybody. In war, there is money. There is money, and there is money in war. It's just not. It's never a good thing. That's one of the last things my granddaddy told me. Let's get to some of these headlines, everybody. Israel expanded its ground and air assault on Gaza this past weekend. Troops and bulldozers entered and remained inside the Palestinian territory. Israel said it was the start of the second stage of the war. They cut phone and internet communications in Gaza on Friday night. A headline from uh, Common Dream said that they want to operate in complete and total darkness. Wow. Service was partially restored yesterday following pressure from the U.S. And you must note that international journalists are not allowed inside of the Palestinian territory. So you really don't know what is going on. Over 1,400 people have been killed in Israel, and over 8,000 people have been killed in Gaza. That's nearly 10,000 people, everybody. The gunman in last week's mass killing in Maine, Robert Card, 40, was found Friday near the locations of the rampage in Lewiston. He apparently committed suicide, everybody. He killed 18 people at a bowling alley and a restaurant on Wednesday. A federal judge reimposed a gag order on Donald Trump yesterday. The former president cannot attack witnesses or attorneys ahead of his trial, on charges of conspiring to overturn the 2020 election. And we dedicate the show to someone who brought us so much joy down through the years. That's right, the actor who embodied character Chandler Bing. Oh, so sarcastic, so much fun. One of the great friends, and he was found in his hot tub at the age of 54. Um, Apparently having drowned, but we're not sure. The police said that they want to investigate further, but he had a long struggle with alcohol and drug addiction and wrote a memoir that came out last year in which he detailed that struggle and said that he just wanted to help people. And I believe that he did. May God bless him. May God bless him and give him sweet rest. Matthew Perry. And everybody in Chicago, I think we're going to have snow tomorrow. Our first snowfall on Halloween. How are you going to dress the kids? How are you going to get dressed, everybody? Today it's going to be chilly, 41 degrees, cloudy, and there is a freeze warning. There's been one overnight. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 37 degrees, partly cloudy. In Major League Baseball, the Rangers will be playing the Diamondbacks tonight, shall I say, and that series is tied at 1. In the NFL, the Vikings 24, the Packers 10. The Vikings are having an okay season so far. They're 4-4. Well, Chicago is 2-6, and they dropped one to the Chargers yesterday. The Chargers 30, the Bears 13. In the NBA, the Timberwolves will be playing the Hawks, and the Bulls will be playing the Pacers. And those are some of the headlines. Hello, everybody. How you doing? Hey, Pam Morris Walton, our gospel sister. I'm so glad as I'm dabbing my nose. I came in from Miami. They gave Africando, a group that really uh, pushes for Africans in the diaspora to become economically interactive with one another and socially and politically interactive. They gave Reverend Jackson and Condoleezza Rice and some others their highest award, and I was honored to go there and speak for him. And yes, Anthony Green, snow. tomorrow in Chicago. And it was an honor to be there. And it's an honor to be with you, my dear gospel sister. How are you today?
I'm doing well and just happy to be here on God's wake up list today, even if it does snow a little bit in Chicago tomorrow. I'm happy to be here. You sound
Unbelievable.
good.
Oh, thank you, as do
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It was a little under the weather, but God, He brought me out all right.
All right
So I'm
now.
good.
I love
I'm
that.
back. Okay. So today we want to speak on something I really touched on a little bit earlier this month because of everything that is going on around us and close to us and away from us, but it's going on. So because of that, we don't want anybody to take let anything give take away their joy.
Mm.
Let me say that again. We don't want anything to take away their joy. So don't give your joy away. Don't give away your joy. No matter what you're going through, everybody, you are God's person. You're included. You are included. One of the songs that my ancestors sang has carried me through a whole lot. This joy I have, the world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it, and the world can't take it away.
Mm. Amen to that. Amen, amen, amen. This joy that I have, and oh, I love it when Shirley Caesar sings that song. This joy I have, the world didn't give it to me, and the world cannot take it away. Love you, Pam Morris. I don't know if Pam Morris, you still there?
Here,
Okay.
can you hear me?
Okay, I couldn't hear you
Okay.
for a hot
All
second.
right.
Oh my gosh. But
Okay. Yes,
yes.
I am here. But let me just say this, and I'm going to end, okay? Don't let people, no one person, circumstance steal your joy. There's difficult things going on around us. There's difficult situations that will come into your life. There is no way sometimes to escape them. But in a world, you will have tribulation. Jesus said that. But he also said, be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. So when any trial of life come your way, you don't have to be defeated and depressed. Hold on to your joy. Hold on to God's unchanging hand. And if you're lost, if you by chance have lost your joy, retrieve it.
Mm.
I am God's person. Jesus gave me joy. I am going to be all right. Don't give away your joy. I am not going to let anybody rain on my parade. Good morning, everybody. I love you, Santita Jackson.
I
That's
love
it.
you. I love you. No, that's a
I love you.
whole lot. That's a whole lot. There's joy I
Yeah.
have.
Thank
Oh
you.
my goodness.
The world didn't give it to me, and the world will not take it away. No.
Amen.
All right.
Amen. Amen. And spread that good cheer, everybody. Spread it. And everybody, please get her book. Where can we get your book? And the name of it is
57 days, the wait for a new heart sparks a spiritual journey of faith and love. And let me say this to you. You can get my book on Amazon. You can get it on PamMorrisSpeaks.com. That's an autographed copy. And every 34 seconds, one person dies from cardiovascular disease. But I'm still breathing because I have someone's heart.
mm,
Get my story. I wrote about it. Get my story, please. That's it.
Amen. No, that's a whole lot. That's a whole lot. That's a whole lot.
thank,
Sending you so
thank you,
much love. Love you, Pam Morris
thank
Walton.
you.
Everybody get that book. Let
I
it bless
love
your
you.
heart. No pun intended.
Thank you,
Of course, thank you.
thank you.
Dr. Shanina Knighton, what is on your mind today as I'm sneezing today? My droplets are going everywhere.
Exactly. It's interesting, Santita, because what I want to talk about right now is mold allergies. So mold allergies being important. One second, I have children fussing in the background this morning.
It's okay. That's a good thing.
Look, I had to mute you so I could holler at them. Keep talking to me. But listen, so Santita, I think the biggest thing right now to discuss is what is a mold allergy? Okay. So this is mold allergy season. And so typically what happens is mold grows on the brown patches of grass. It grows on the brown like it causes, when you're thinking about the leaves browning, and it occurs, and what it does is it causes respiratory problems like allergies or asthma. So people will literally get issues with, like, let's say itching in their nose, eyes, or in their throat, and they'll say, I'm coming down with the cold, but not recognizing that the season is changing and that they may indeed have a mold allergy, which is something that is very common. So when someone is looking to say, do I have, like, let's say, signs of mold sickness or a mold allergy, these individuals will have, like, the watery eyes, the itchy eyes, nose and throat. They'll have that cough and that postnasal drip. It'll be, a runny and stuffy nose and sneezing, right? And it looks a lot like. But the thing is also being aware is what is the surroundings doing? So, for example, right now in Cleveland, we have some rainy weather. The leaves are wet. And if the air, depending on the humidity, is thick, then that's going to make you more prone, if you have a mold allergy, to having something that would be reflective of cold symptoms. So it's important that when you are thinking about, okay, well, what can I do to make sure that I'm staying away from, let's say, mold, or I'm staying away from, like, wet leaves. If you're outside and you're raking them, it's making sure that you do have on some sort of mask or some sort of protective barrier. If you do have that potential allergy, it's also asking yourself as well, like, are these wet leaves, like, let's say, within close proximity to you? Are you spending a lot of time outdoors? So there's a lot of factors to consider if you are in the situation of being around wet leaves and wet dander. It's something that people rarely think about, especially now, because automatically you would assume, like, hey, maybe it's COVID, or maybe it's a common cold, or maybe I'm getting sick because my immune system is weak. Now, we'll tell you, a droplet is a droplet is still a droplet, so it's not to minimize it in terms of it being reflective of cold symptoms, because it could be the start of a cold coming on, or it could work in tandem with the cold. But it's also asking yourself, is there something that is happening right now that's around me that's giving me the feeling of being sick? And 9 times out of 10, like, it can. And people's symptoms typically dissipate, but depending on the type of bug that you might be exposed to, or the toxins from mold, that could be, let's say, ongoing throughout the season. You may or may not have any relief, like some people end up having chronically, but it's just important to be aware that there is a such thing as mold allergies. Mold allergies, there is a sensitivity to it, which can trigger asthma. If you already have it, it can trigger allergies. So it's asking, is there something that I'm allergic to that's bringing on this same illness every single year? And so that would be my recommendation today. Of course, if that is something that someone is going through, of course, hand hygiene is the single most important way to make sure that you are not spreading your germs, but also from picking up germs. Think about it like this. If you are wiping your nose and wiping your eyes and it's just a mold allergy, but you're coming in contact with some droplets that are contaminated, that is a vehicle in order for you to make yourself ill.
I'm telling you, because this is my time of year when I feel it, and I feel it right now. And oh my gosh, I mean, I'm sneezing like 3 times, pow, 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 pow. But when I take an allergy medicine, everything calms down. Just everything calms
Mm-hmm.
down. So I've got to, and you know, let me tell you, girl, I've got to rest. And I hope everyone takes that piece too. I mean, because you can do with so much, y'all. Just please get your rest. Take care of yourselves, whatever you do. Please visit Dr. Shanina. Hey, Dr. Nina, HEYDRNINA. You're gonna get some of the most practical advice. In fact, I'm gonna go see my doctor this week and look at my serotonin levels. I have not had brain fog or anything, but she just made me sensitive to that. I said, I did have COVID last year, and let me just make sure that I'm kind of on point, because that's something that I've not checked. And thank you for that last week. I told several people who've been talking about brain fog, having brain fog since they had COVID, and they said, wow, I'd never heard that. I said, huh. If you listen to Dr. Shanita Knight, you would. How about that? I
That's
love
it. And I will say,
yes.
Santita, I love you too. And I will be absolutely back to update and post this week. I will tell, our audience, I've been absolutely running grants and life has been lifing, but I will make sure that I am updating those tips a lot more often than what I have been. So it will be more up to date information on there.
But run the old ones. I mean, because everybody needs a reminder. It's always something that makes you go,
Absolutely.
oh, wow, I did, I've forgotten about that. And that's the thing. You forget about things. You forget. And the reason you're here every day is because you not only give us new information, but you remind us about, I'd forgotten about that. That's important. All of it's important. So, look, I'm waiting. You know me, because I have you on lock. I go on Instagram so I can find out exactly what you're doing. I said, oh boy, something else that I need to get on top of. Sending you so much love, everybody. Let's talk about President Biden's falling poll numbers. He fell 11 points in the last month alone. 11 points. Why? And there's several groups who are not happy with how he's handled this conflict in the Middle East. So it's young people, it's the Arab community who figure very prominently in that swing state, in that key state of Michigan and Pennsylvania. Uh, so, is there anything he can do to move the needle? I mean, will this Mideast conflict will it undo his presidency? Uh, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. And what else? What about Pence leaving the race? Has Trump solidified his hold on the nomination? What do you think? Call me at 773-763-9278. You cannot make this stuff up. You can't. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute.
28.
This is all too much. What are you doing, hon?
I'm doing okay.
Oh boy.
Look interested to hear about these falling poll numbers and all of this other jazz and stuff that's going on.
Oh, it's a big deal. It's a big deal, and it's something that I think we need to pay attention to. We really, really need to pay attention. Because it's not inconsequential. I mean, you have someone who is really struggling, and he is the nominee. I mean, he's the nominee presumptive, and it's like, okay, but I don't think we're going into the season with a strong hand, and that's not a good thing. So there you go. But I am moving some of these things out of here. Okay. Okay. Wow. But your family's well? Hmm. Okay, is anyone still there?
Says Dr. Knighton's still there.
Okay, she might have put us on
I'm
mute.
still here.
Okay, no.
I'm here. My children arguing about candy this morning.
No. It's honey. It is okay. Trust me. It is okay. It is okay. I'm trying to do more than one thing.
No, I get it. I'm multitasking too.
Sending Dwight McKee through. I called Bryce Green twice, and he looks like he's calling me back right now.
Okay, fantastic. Okay. Hi, Dwight. How are you?
Fine. How you doing?
Great. We'll start off with Biden and his falling approval numbers.
Sending Bryce Green through.
Bryce Green, how are you? How did the march go? Okay, we don't have a good connection with you right now. Bryce?
Hello?
No, keep talking, honey, so we can work it out.
Okay.
1 minute.
Yeah, my phone has been acting a little strange
Okay, no, this is
this
better.
morning. It can't seem to hold the charge.
Oh, gosh, that's awful.
Yeah, test. You said this is a little bit better?
No, it's much better. Yep.
All right, nice.
It's much better because it was couldn't. You were go wait. Fortunately, that is okay. And you're on with Dwight McKee. Oh boy,
How you doing, Bryce?
Bryce.
How you doing, Bryce? How you doing? I'm doing good. How you feeling? Pretty fast.
And Dr.
10
Knight
seconds,
is
everyone.
standing by. She wants to hear everything.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am greedy.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. I want you all to like and share the show. We're going to have Professor John Quigley on it, a specialist in international law later on in the show, and Dr. David Gibbs. We want to talk about what's going on over there. When this second stage of the war in Gaza began on Friday night, they shut down all communication. So you really did not know what was going on. The numbers of people killed: Israelis, 1,400, Gazans, 8,000. President Biden last week was accused of genocide denial because he said those numbers, I really doubt them. I do believe that innocents have been killed, but people are not happy about that. And so, this is while so many questions are unanswered. The most intelligent, I would say, the army that has the greatest intelligence, really, if not in the world, certainly in that region, is the Israeli is the IDF, and no one can figure out how it is such a massive intelligent failure occurred and why it took several hours for the IDF to show up and save lives of Israelis. What happened? I mean, ask those questions. Really, we need to find out. In the meantime, it seems that the American public are having a response. Tens of thousands of people all across the country, city by city, something you have never seen, are now coming out supporting a ceasefire, supporting the Palestinian community. I want to know what your thoughts are about that. Call me at 773-763-9278 and tell me why do you think, as this article from Common Dreams suggests, that his falling poll numbers, he fell 11 percentage points this month alone, that it's his unconditional support, they write, for Israel as it carries out massacres in the Gaza Strip, that's angering a part of his base. In September, 86% of Democrats approved of his job performance. But between October 2nd and October 23rd, his approval rating amongst Democrats has fallen to 75%, the lowest level of his presidency. What do you think about that? Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. We've got Dwight McKee, noted social scientist, and Bryce Green, fairness and accuracy in reporting. Bryce Green, talk to us. What do you think is happening?
Well, it seems to me that the world is fed up with Joe Biden, and the country is fed up with Joe Biden. And not just fed up with Joe Biden, but also fed up with our general political system. They see horrible things happening overseas, but they also notice that their lives are, getting remarkably worse. The administration decided to run on what's called Bidenomics. But if we look at the numbers, the poverty rate, the number of people in poverty, has increased by almost 60% in the last year alone. And when you look at the American foreign policy, you see massive spending on entanglements abroad that are getting increasingly unpopular. And this U.S. support for Israel against Gaza seems to be one of the major humanitarian crimes and war crimes that the Biden administration is supporting. Now, the Ukraine war had a lot more force within the American public in terms of the U.S. support. But with Israel, it's nothing short of a turkey shoot. I mean, they're bombing people inside of an open-air prison that people can't leave. They're cutting off food and water. That's something Russia never did. But the fact that the U.S. is supporting it, I think reflects pretty poorly on the administration in the eyes of many Arab Americans and many Americans in general. People are saying that we don't want to vote for Joe Biden because these are the policies that we're against. Now, in American democracy, there's this line, there's this idea that if you don't vote for one of the major two parties, you're wasting your vote. And that sort of idea, even though most Americans identify as independent, but that idea has kept the prospect of a third party from actually being a serious prospect. But more and more people are, accepting that even if their candidate might not win, the current candidates are unacceptable. Biden is unacceptable. Trump is unacceptable. And the only way to get out of the system is to change your voting behavior. And that's, I think, a perfectly rational explanation. Whether or not this will have an impact on Trump or whether or not this will give RFK Jr. or Cornel West or whoever a boost remains to be seen. But the fact is, this reflects a crisis in our political system and its legitimacy.
I mean, the whole system or just with Biden?
Well, with the whole system, really. But Biden is the current figurehead, and he's the guy currently sitting in the chair. And so it will reflect in his electoral prospects. But the system, this affects people from a system. When you tell them that their voice doesn't matter much, and when you continue to make their lives worse, when you see jobs leaving, cost of living rising, well, they're going to blame who is in charge, but they're also going to blame the system as a whole. And so that can either manifest itself in two ways. They're going to either vote for someone else to try and get the system to change, or they're going to simply stay home and give up and say that my vote doesn't matter. Again, both of these are completely understandable and human responses to the political pressures that we have.
Dwight McKee, 11 points inside of a month. What do you think is going on?
Well, I think people are beginning to see the Biden we always knew was president. The Biden that locked 1 million black people up in jail. The Biden that resisted children getting on school buses. The Biden that had the Haitians beat with whips. He had always been able to smile and kind of dismiss that. But this is so blatant and so reprehensible and so in your face that people are now seeing a Biden that they never really had to come to terms with before. That he and Netanyahu are two war criminals who are co-signing on genocide for people who literally can't defend themselves at that level. And to give them carte blanche to do whatever he decides to do, which is what he said, is that, Israel basically has no limits, no check and balances as they pay these people back, in that Yahoo's words. Is really a war crime that we haven't seen at this level since Vietnam in My Lai. And also in it, what you're looking at is you're looking at a a oppressiveness against those young people who now are trying to make their voices heard. They see a backlash to their positions that they didn't know was possible in America. That you protest against this war, and they're talking about taking your scholarship away. They're talking about, doing the dossier on you and you not being able to be hired for a job. They're talking about taking money from the schools that you go to because you have a counter position. And these young people have not seen repression at this level based on a political and what they see as a moral position. And so you see a unprecedented backlash. The people who had kind of drunk the Kool-Aid, who had believed that the Democrats were different, who believed that Biden was different, and now they find out it's all the same. And then him having also that kind of unlimited support for the Ukrainian war, that he thinks that he's going at one level, if he just puts enough money in, that somehow the Ukrainians will win this war, and then tie it with what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians as if it's the same thing. Again, it's a real criminal act. He's trying to make this war, one of these wars, parallel. When the Ukrainians are fighting for their lives against the Russians, and it's a legitimate fight because they are kind of equally yoked in terms of the weapons they have and the power they can inflict upon each other, as opposed to the Israelis having all of the tanks and all of the airlines, the airplanes and the jets, and then him supplying it with ships, and they have unlimited access to bomb women and children. People are beginning to see that and find it almost incomprehensible, and they're responding and reacting to that.
Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. What do you think? How do you think this crisis is going to impact the 2024 election? How do you think it's going to impact the 2024 election? It seems that we're seeing some effects of it already, Bryce Green. Bryce?
Sorry, I was muted.
No worries.
I'm sorry, my phone is acting up. Can you ask the question again?
Oh, of course. How do you think this crisis is impacting the 2024 election? I mean, you've got Republicans in Congress who have pushed back on funding Ukraine. They still have full-hearted and full-throated support for funding Israel, which is a prosperous nation. I mean, this is money they did not certainly publicly ask for. And they have a stronger social safety net than the United States does, which is very interesting. That having been said, 2/3 of Americans want a ceasefire. They're like, everybody, Palestinians and Israelis, stop shooting. Stop. Hezbollah, everybody, stop, drop your weapons, which is what the police do when they walk in the middle of a conflict. But we are not really being the police, Bryce. We are standing on one side saying, you can do the ground war. But interestingly, a Lieutenant General James Glenn from the Marines went in last week along with another group of top flight generals and military strategists, and they said, we don't see a way out of this for you, Israel. I mean, and they are special friends. So you tell special friends a hard truth and say, hey, I don't think this is winnable for you. We thought we could do something in Fallujah. That didn't work out quite so well for us. So what you need to do is something else, not this. And they clearly did not take his advice. He started the ground offensive. And another one of Lieutenant General Glenn's colleagues said, he said, look, this is completely Israel's creation. I'm not in this. But it seems that we are. What about the 2024 election? How will all of this stuff that keeps coming up and coming into the discussion, how will that impact the election as we're watching tens of thousands? You could barely get a few hundred at at a rally supporting an end to a ceasefire in the Middle East, and certainly not standing up for Palestinians, but that's changing in the United States. Bryce Green.
Right. Right. Well, this massive outpouring of support for Palestine and, the support for a ceasefire, what that signals to me is that in the 2024 election, there's going to be an influx, a massive influx of pro-Israeli money, shaping the opinions and shaping the public statements of our elected officials. One of the most powerful lobbies in the country, on par with the oil lobby, with Wall Street, is the Israel lobby, and that has historical reasons. But what the Israel lobby does is it makes it so that there are intense pressures on every elected official, and even some of the general bureaucrats, to support whatever the state of Israel wants to do, to maintain the flow of funds from the U.S. to Israel, to maintain the political support for Israel, to maintain the diplomatic support for Israel. And politicians are responsive to that. Since it's easy to buy politicians in America, one of the primary ways that they can be controlled is by giving them money, by giving them funds, or worse, by funding their opponents, or at least threatening to fund their opponents. So Congress people are going to have to deal with a major influx of pro-Israeli cash. And, there's only a small number of Congress people who have expressed support for a ceasefire. Someone just at or around a dozen Congress people have. Well, you can expect that they are going to face immense challenges. You've probably seen, I haven't checked on this, but I wouldn't be surprised if you've seen an influx of cash going into their primary opponents, trying to unseat them as a threat to say that, well, you went against the national consensus on Israel, therefore you must be punished. And there's a lot of reason to suspect that this will have a massive impact on the outcome.
Well, but that happens all the time. It happened to my former boss, Congressman Gus Savage. It happened to Reverend during his presidential campaigns. I mean, it happens. I mean, this is, they push back. And I'm not mad at anybody. It's just, you got to be very careful when you have power. My father often says that when you have power, try not to use it, because if you use it, you could abuse it. And when you abuse it, you will lose it. And it seems like there's something in the atmosphere, something in the zeitgeist, Bryce, that has shifted. And it concerns me because I see a lot of my Jewish brothers and sisters who are very progressive who think that this is wrong, Bryce. I mean, they Jewish Voice for Peace shut down Grand Central Station on Friday. For those of you who are not, I lived in New York for a long time and I'm still there a lot. Grand Central Station is massive, and it's at the center of the transportation city. It's at the center of transportation in the city of New York. Everything's got to go through Grand Central Station. When you're coming in and out of the city, whatever. They shut it down, y'all. Shut it down. And this is happening all over the place. I mean, because I don't want people to assume that all of our Jewish brothers and sisters have signed on to this, even in Israel. They're like, wait, would you just get the hostages back already? They're almost 6,000 Palestinians. Give them to them. Give me my family back, and let's keep it moving. Because people don't even realize over there how unpopular Netanyahu is. He was on his way to jail before this happened. Prison. Bryce?
No, that's correct. It's strange. You mentioned that that this Israeli money has been floating around for quite some time, but I've never seen the level of propaganda, opinion making, and I guess thought policing really in the mainstream media before this war. I mean, it seems that this is being billed as an existential threat. This is on par with the coverage that appeared after 9/11. And so many of the people who oppose some of the excesses of the Bush administration's response to 9/11, they were also targeted with pro-Israeli money against them in their primaries because, the Israel lobby was a major component of the neocon consensus that really drove the Bush administration policy. But I do think that you're right, that there is a shift coming where people don't see these things as legitimate. People might not even be affected by the political money. Because remember, where does political money go? A lot of it goes towards advertisements and events and billboards, things like that, commercials. If people aren't going to be affected by those, if people have already considered that these mainstream sources of information are illegitimate, well, I think that might produce a shift that opens up a lot of space for the political system where perhaps, we talk about a third-party candidate as impossible, but perhaps it might be enough that the major parties have to moderate their positions on certain issues so as not to lose all those voters. But we talked about all these people saying that they're never going to vote for Joe Biden. Well, we'll see what happens. But if this continues to be, in the air, people continue to talk about the election like that, well, maybe it could cause the powers that be to try and shift their position, even against the interests of power, just in order to stay popular, or at least not as unpopular as they would be if they continued this horrible policy.
Dwight McKee, your thoughts? Has anything shifted in the atmosphere?
Yeah, a lot has shifted. Bryce is correct in terms of AIPAC's impact on the political process. But traditionally, that has been at a high-end political level. That's been between them and congressmen, them and some local elected officials, they and some mayors. Now, for the first time, is average people who are contrary to their position is feeling the wrath. And they had never really directly felt the wrath before. They didn't understand the subjectivity of propaganda at the media level because it was so sophisticated. And so, they were propagandized and they were led, but it was a very subtle kind of leading through commercials, through public service announcements, through advertising, through TV shows. But now these kids are hearing, if you take this position, we're going to close down your sorority. If you take this position, we're going to lock your fraternity off of the campuses or reduce their privileges. If you take this position, there's certain jobs that we're going to recommend that you will not be hired for when you apply for them. Because now we see you not as contrary, but as subversive. That in the land of the free, the brave and the free, you can't have your own opinion. You can't have a contrary opinion. And if you don't take the party line, there's going to be a price that you have to pay. And it's for the first time, these young people who are, very idealistic and who in many ways really believed in American experience and American dream, now see themselves as oppressed and themselves as being vulnerable to somebody else's position. And they also, at a very basic level, particularly in the Black community, is they don't understand how all of this money is being found for war when this basic services are being cut, when they can't pay their rent. How can you now, when they can't afford the price of oil for their own car? How can you every month decide I'm going to send another $100 million over here to bomb these people, and I'm going to send another $100 billion over here to bomb these people, and you can't find $100 billion to help me pay my tuition or to help my family get out of debt? And so people now are personally experiencing what people of color have been experiencing for the last couple of 100 years here. is the personal price you pay for not towing the party line.
Hey, everybody, let's talk about this. And I want you all to speak to Tracy on the other side. She said, seriously, again, are Biden haters the only guests invited to this show now? Bless your heart, you still listen. I appreciate it. Biden has urged caution. This is not his war. I am not worried about the polls. 91 times indicted Trump will not get our votes. Yeah, Tracy, I hear you, but people are dropping out of that Republican race because Trump is strong over there. And as a Democrat, it's very unsettling to have someone so weak over here. Weak, yes. We ask the questions because you want to find out how you can turn this ship around. That's why you ask this question. You have someone who is now the Speaker of the House who has the power to bring legislation to the floor that's going to hurt people. He's going to cut Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. He's going to do that. And he has the votes to do it. Got to talk about that. And I want you all to speak to that on the other side of the break on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. All right, kids. We are cooking with hot grease. You all can keep talking. You want to answer? Tracy didn't call in, but she did say this. What do you think about that? That these are Biden haters. I don't think anyone here hates Biden. I really don't think that. I think you're missing the point, Tracy, really. But you do ask provocative questions and it gets people to talking. So thank you for that. Your thoughts, Dwight or Bryce?
I hate what he does. I hate his position in this.
Mm-hmm.
I think his position is a war crime, and to be able to justify the bombing of these innocent people and supporting, not just
sending Dr. Quigley through,
co-signing on it, but supporting it with money and military wear is immoral and very dangerous, because I think what it's going to do is going to elevate the fight, and it may turn into a regional fight or even a world war. That's the danger that you're in, and the only way to prevent that is a ceasefire. But I'm rest assured that these other Arab countries are not going to watch their brothers and sisters and cousins get bombed in oblivion and not respond one way or another. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen that way. And they pretty much already threatened that they're not going to stand on the sidelines and just watch this happen. And at the point what Netanyahu is, he's trying to save his own hide because he was under indictment and they were demonstrating against him. And it may explain why the intelligence didn't respond. And they allowed 6 hours of those shootings to go on and those kidnappings to go on to give him a pretext to bomb the country in the hell, and also to take the spotlight off of him. It's interesting that the other day that the Arabics was sending frogmen to try to bomb the ships, and they were able to detect all of them. You can detect somebody underwater, but you can't detect somebody in a kite flying overhead. I mean, that's a little strange to a lot of people. That they allowed, it seems to be to a lot of people, that they allowed this to happen as a strategy for him to stay in power and to pretext for genocide.
Well, I want to introduce
and
you.
I think it's going to show up whether or not we hate Biden has nothing to do with how what you think about Biden has nothing to do with what's happening in the public square.
And nobody hates Biden.
Me or Bryce had nothing to do with 7 months. I mean, those 11-point drop in his popularity. That has nothing to do with me or Bryce.
Well, I want you all to meet Professor John Quigley. I mean, he is one of the foremost experts on international law in the world, and we're honored to have him with us today. He's written several important books about this conflict. From him today because he has been talking about war crimes and it's important for us to really wrap our arms around this because our money is in it. His one of the three of his books, the State of the Palestine, International Law in the Middle East Conflict, the International Diplomacy of Israel's Founders, Deception at the United Nations in the Quest for Palestine. They're both from Cambridge University Press, and The Ruses for War, American Interventionism Since World War II. Of course, I'm going to give you a formal introduction when we get on the other side, but I wanted you to meet young Bryce Green. He is a student and pursuing your master's or PhD. Which is it? Or both?
PhD.
PhD. Brilliant writer from
PhD.
Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. And Dwight McKee, brilliant sociologist from here in Chicago, and he's the dean of the Ma'afa Project. I want you both to meet Professor John Quigley. I've been trying to get him for the past couple of weeks, and I was finally able to catch him. Professor Quigley, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Good morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. When I first started, I've ordered all your books and all of that, and I'm just very excited that you're with us today to help us to understand what we're looking at. Because some people are saying that we're Biden haters because of the questions that we've been asking. No doubt some people would say that we're anti-Semitic, and that's not true. The thing is, when you care about people, you ask them the tough questions and you push them. And I don't think that's happened with Israel in the United States, and that is very unfortunate because they're being hurt that way by being allowed to go on and on and on and on. Because look, you saw the what happened at the airport in Russia, and this wasn't even in Moscow. This was an outlier airport. But these people, they saw the flight coming from Tel Aviv, and almost a riot almost ensued. And you can feel that tension in the United States right now and around the world. You can feel it. We have been warned as Americans not to fly. Y'all, this is very serious. I know I pivot to this just about every day, but I think you need to understand where we are and what we're looking at, everybody. So call us at 773-763-9278. Thank you so much, Devin. 773-763-WCPT. But we want to hear your thoughts, Professor, quickly about this, because you've been writing about this for a long time. Hold on. Who is calling me? Hello? Hello? Yes. Oh, could I call you? No worries. Could I call you back? I'm on the air right now. Oh, I probably just give me an hour. Thank you so much for calling me. Thank you. Bye-bye. Well, that was a reminder, at least for me to turn off my ringer. How about that? Ooh. Okay, everybody, we're about to come up.
10 seconds.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am green.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. The day before first snowfall in Chicago. Oh, did I tell you it's also Halloween tomorrow? Unbelievable. You cannot make this stuff up. You're going to have a down jacket on underneath your costume. But, let's just have a good time anyway. Thank you for showing up at the Rainbow Push Conference. We had our Halloween party, and it was big fun, and I'm so glad that you all were there. Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. As we look at President Biden's falling polling numbers, he's fallen 11 points inside of 2 weeks in the month of October. That does not bode well, everybody. In the meantime, the Gaza ground offensive, which American military forces and the president have warned against, well, it has begun. They shut off all communications. No foreign journalists are allowed into Gaza, into Palestine. And what is going on, everybody? What is going on? What do you think about this? What about this? Not only a media blackout, but the blockade for food. I mean, people, if think about it, no fuel is there. They're having to shut down hospitals. That means incubators are going off, which means babies will die. Life support machines are being turned off. That means patients will die. This is dire. It is awful. It is also a war crime. How do we get a ceasefire and stop the madness? Because that's really what it is. It really is. And the language has matched all of this. Calling the with you have with um, members of the IDF, calling and of the Knesset, calling the Palestinian human animals, talking about erasing them, the slaughter, and all of that. It's just not helping. It's no one's going to win. No one's going to win. So call me at 773 763 9278 773 763 WCPT and let me know what you think about all of this on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. We've got a lot to talk about, and we've got one of the foremost experts in international law with us today, Professor John Quigley, Professor Emeritus of International Law from The Ohio State University. Cannot wait to hear from him shortly. Well, let's get some of these headlines. Israel expanded the ground and air assault in Gaza on Friday. Israeli tanks, troops, and bulldozers entered and remained inside the Palestinian territory. They said it was the start of the second stage of the war. They cut phone lines and internet communications on Friday night. Service has been partially restored, but humanitarian aid cannot get through. Over 1,400 people have been killed in Israel. More than 8,000 have been killed in Palestine. The gunman in last week's mass killing in Maine was found dead. Robert Card, Army reservist, 40 years of age, was found Friday near the locations of the rampage in Lewiston, Maine. He died of an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. He killed 18 people at a bowling alley and restaurant on Wednesday night. A federal judge reimposed a gag order on former President Donald Trump yesterday. The former president cannot attack witnesses or attorneys ahead of his trial on charges of conspiring to overturn the 2020 election. And after Matthew Perry, who's given us so much joy on the show Friends. And he had quite the substantial career, everybody. But we all remember and love Chandler Bing. Well, he was found in his home, having drowned. At least that's a preliminary report by police. And we just pray for his family. He struggled all through that time. As he was giving us all this joy, he was struggling with alcoholism and drug addiction. And he wrote a memoir last year in which he said, all I want to be remembered for is not friends. It's not all the work that I've done. I want to be remembered as someone who tried to help somebody. And may God place peace upon this young man. God bless you, Matthew Perry, and thank you for all that you've left behind, a tremendous body of work. We just love you and hope that you carry that love with you. Hope you know just how much you were loved and how much you were valued when you were here on earth. Oh boy, in Chicago, we're going to have a high of, it's going to be cold today, 41 degrees. We had a freeze warning last night. It'll be cloudy. And in Minneapolis, St. Paul, 37 degrees, partly cloudy. In Major League Baseball, the Rangers versus the Diamondbacks, the World Series is tied 1-1. In the NFL, the Vikings were triumphant over the Packers. They've had a good season so far, 4-4. The Bears, though, they're still struggling. They're 2-6. They fell to the Chargers last night, 30-13. And in the NBA, the Timberwolves will be facing the Hawks, and the Bulls will be facing the Pacers. And those are some of the headlines. Everybody, please like and share the show. Let's talk about what's happening in Gaza. With many people, you have the president who some people have said have engaged in genocide denial. When the numbers, and they're quite substantial, 1,400 Israelis dead, that's too many people. 7,000 as of last week. Palestinians dead. Now the numbers are up over 8,000, according to the United Nations and other credible agencies. And the president has said, innocent people are going to be killed in war, but I doubt those numbers. Wow. Some people are saying that he's engaged in genocide denial. But I don't think that has been the point of this brilliant international lawyer, the Professor Emeritus of International Law at Ohio State University, John Quigley. He has many books, among them The Statehood of Palestine, International Law in the Middle East Conflict, The Ruses for War, American Interventionism Since World War II. Fascinating. In fact, my book's just arrived yesterday, and I cannot wait to dig into first the Ruses of War, just how we have kind of tricked our way into war since World War II. But talk to us, Professor, quickly. What is going on, and is what's happening in Gaza and in the mess in the West Bank, is that being reported accurately in your estimation to the United States?
Yeah, well, I think we're not getting a totally accurate picture of what's going on, either in Gaza or what happened on the 7th of October, which is widely being taken as a kind of an episode of random killing of Israelis by the Hamas people. And that's not an accurate portrayal of what happened. What happened on the 7th of October was conceived as a military action by the Hamas people. There's war been going on now since 1967. I mean, Israel invaded that area in 1967. And what is happening now is a response to that. And the occupation has continued since 1967. So you've still got war going on, which means that military action by Hamas against Israel is legitimate under the laws of warfare and under the law that applies to aggression. That is, if aggression is committed against your territory, you can take military action to oppose that aggression. And that's what Hamas was doing. It had good information on military posts of Israel and went into them. And it appears that of the people killed in Israel, a substantial number of them were, in fact, military people. So when it is commonly said in the media that Hamas went in and killed 400 or 1,400 Israelis, many of those killings were lawful under the laws of warfare, and many of the civilians who were killed were probably killed by the Israelis in responsive shelling of the areas where they saw the Hamas fighters. So the number of Israelis actually killed, who were civilians killed by Hamas, is probably in the range of a couple hundred, not 1,400. But you mentioned genocide. You mentioned that I'm an international lawyer. The Genocide Convention, which was adopted by the UN back in 1948, defines as genocide the act of inflicting on a civilian population conditions of life that are calculated to destroy that population. And as I say that, I have to think that the people who wrote that in 1948 were thinking precisely of situations like what you have described in Gaza, with the cutoff of fuel, a prohibition on humanitarian aid coming in. You've got a population that is confined to a small area. They have nowhere to flee. Israel does seem to be inflicting conditions of life that are calculated to destroy that population. And you can put that together with another aspect of genocide, which is that there has to be an intent that accompanies those actions, an intent to destroy the people. And you and your guests have just described some of the statements of the Israeli officials about ending the situation in Gaza, about finishing the situation. And when you put that together with the bombardment, that seems to me to come very close to the definition of genocide.
We're talking with Professor John Quigley, expert in international law he's a professor emeritus of international law at Ohio State University. We're talking with him about what is happening in in Gaza, what is happening in the West Bank, what's happening in Israel. You just made a charge. I'd like to go back over that. Um, we say that, I mean, now it has been confirmed that there are 8,000 Palestinians plus who've been killed. And, we're given the figure, which I just read from the Washington Post and NBC, ABC, all of them are reporting 1,400 Israelis. And you're saying that that number is not quite accurate. Could you double down on that, please? Because you're saying that a lot of people who were in the military were killed. Because I mean, people are saying that okay, you've got 229 or so not POWs. Well, you what hostages? And some people, I heard a reporter ask, okay, how many are POWs and how many are hostages? Because POWs operate under another set of conventions. Could you explain? Uh, you said 1,400 is not quite the number.
Mhm. Yes, I mean that's the number that's been given out. I suspect the number is closer to something like 1,000 of total number of people killed. But I mean, there's great need for an international investigation to see exactly what happened. And you may have noticed that the Israeli government 3 or 4 days ago announced that it would no longer grant visas to anyone from the United Nations coming into Israel. And I think the reason that they did that is that they don't want UN people poking around and trying to find out what actually happened. But I think the operation was aimed in two directions. One was to damage military posts in southern Israel. And the second was to capture people and take them back to Gaza, which is something that is prohibited under the laws of warfare. But just to talk now about the purpose of it, I think it was twofold in that way, and that the Israelis, who were seemingly unprepared for this, began responding in rather random ways. That is, they saw that there were areas where Hamas people were operating, and they began firing at those areas, including the area where that concert was being held. So it's and including the kibbutzim. On the border with Gaza. So it's not at all clear how much of the damage to property, to buildings in the kibbutzim, and how much of the killing is attributable to Hamas or is attributable to the responsive action by Israel.
If we are looking at the kibbutzes, were any of the settlements attacked that the United Nations have deemed illegal, or were these just people's homes?
Well, the settlements that the UN has declared illegal are in the West Bank. Mm-hmm. These kibbutzim are in the part of territory that Israel has held since 1948. So the people are not referred to as settlers in that sense, but many people, many civilians in Israel are armed, and this was an area near Gaza. And you may have seen pictures just in the last couple of days of the of Mr. Gvir, who was in the Israeli cabinet, giving out rifles to civilians, and President Biden actually has come down on Israel, saying that if we give rifles to Israel, they have to go to the military only. But I mention this to say that from the standpoint of Hamas, the people in those kibbutzim would have seemed in part to be combatants. and they didn't know where the military was. So, so they went through these kibbutzim, and they did kill a good number of civilians while doing so. But I think that was not the purpose of the operation.
Well, you have asserted that the intention has been to kill. Is it just Hamas or is it Palestinians too?
Yeah, in Gaza.
In Gaza.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, that's hard to figure. But I think that the way the bombardment has been conducted, one can say that it shows an intention to kill people. I mean, in the criminal law, we have different definitions of intent. I mean, I can say I want to kill somebody and I'm going to kill them, or I can do something that I know is going to kill them, and I engage in that action. Either one is considered to be intention. And when you destroy buildings in the way they have been destroyed in Gaza, that qualifies as intentional killing. If you just think about the video that we've all seen on television of demolished areas, that kind of bombardment is undertaken in full knowledge that you're killing large numbers of civilians. And when the question has arisen as to the accuracy of figures, whether it's 8,000 Palestinians, whether that is an inflated number being given by the health ministry, which is under the jurisdiction of Hamas. Well, that question actually was asked of a BBC reporter a couple of days ago before the communications were cut off as to whether that number was inflated. And he said, far from being inflated, it's probably an undercount because the health ministry only gives numbers relating to persons that they can identify as being killed. But there are people under the rubble of all of those buildings who have not been counted and who may never be counted. So the number of 8,000 is probably an understatement.
What should we know about this conflict? I mean, what messages are we not getting, Professor Quigley?
Well, one other important message is that the population of Gaza is largely persons who are from other areas in Palestine. And in 1948, they were forced out by bombing that was at the time called terrorist by the United States. And they fled, and many of them fled to Gaza. And within the space of several months in 1948, the population of Gaza went up threefold, three times what it had been before. And that created an impossible situation, an unlivable situation for the people there. So that's the backstory, and that's the context, and that's why Hamas is engaging in this kind of action that it did on 7th of October, in order to try to break out of that. So you've got that going back to 1948. Then in 1948, the Israelis were not able to extend their control to the Gaza Strip. Egypt had its army there. But in 1967, they went in and took that. They tried actually in 1956 and did hold it for a few months, but President Eisenhower forced them to leave. So they went back again in 1967, and that time they kept it and occupied it physically until 2005, and since then have maintained a blockade around it. So this action of the 7th of October is not something coming out of the blue. It's not as if, you've got two countries and one decides to invade the other. There's this whole backstory that we're not getting in the media.
Professor John Quigley, specialist in international law. Indeed, he's a professor emeritus of international law at Ohio State University. I cannot wait to have you back, and I want to hear you talk about the ruses of war. I mean, these wars that American interventionism since the Second World War, and and then your other book in which you detail just how Israel was founded and what happened at the United Nations. I cannot wait to hear you tell that story. Will you come back and be with us sometime soon, Professor Quigley?
I will be happy to.
I cannot wait. Blessings to you, everybody. Professor John Quigley, Ohio State University. Call us at 773-763-9278. What do you think about what you've heard? What do you think about what is happening over there right now? Wow. Gonna have to figure out something because we are in the middle of this, everybody, and everybody in the world sees us there. Are we safe here? I'm not paranoid. I'm just saying, people make you feel the pain. That's what the foreign minister of Iran said that we were going to do. He kind of walked it back yesterday, but I kind of believed him the first time. Don't want to, because this is where we all live. And we have the power to really shut this war down. We do. But you have to do it. You have to get out in the streets. You have to march. You have to call your congresspersons. You have to shut down this funding. You're the one. We are the ones who have to do it. We're the ones. Back with Dwight McKee, Bryce Green, and Dr. David Gibbs on the Santita Jackson Show. Praise God. And thank you, Dr. John Quigley, for your wonderful insights and research down through the years. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Professor Quigley?
Yes.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
Okay, I enjoyed that. Yeah, we got over some good information.
And there's more to get out. It's just, people like you with all of your expertise don't get on the platforms, but I wanted you to meet Bryce Green and Dwight McKee. They were listening to you with great interest. Dwight and Bryce, you want to say hello to Professor Quigley?
Yeah, that was an excellent analysis. I think the conclusions you wrote that are the same that I've arrived at, and that there seems to be a large amount of evidence of foreknowledge of these attacks, even going up to Hamas warnings about that Israel will not be able to get away with its crimes in the West Bank. Then you have the multiple intelligence failures. In fact, the New York Times just reported this morning about how Israel
sending Dr. Gibbs through
data for Hamas radios over the last year, but during the attack, they found these same radios on Hamas bodies. Well, why is that? I mean, and the political situation over there is such that there is motivation to allow these attacks as a pretext.
Right. Yeah. That's possible. Yeah, I'm not really sure about that. Whether they were kind of inviting the attack or that they were simply reacting. But they do have a history when they have an opportunity to get rid of Palestinians, they take it. So whichever way
exactly
it is,
and then you have this.
It's not good. Mm-hmm.
Right. Then you have the issue of the death count of the Israelis. Haaretz, they published the names that have, quote, been cleared for publication, and the total is about 933, 500 civilians, about 250 soldiers, and the rest police officers and other security forces. But like you said, they don't distinguish between civilians killed by Hamas and civilians killed by Israel, and we don't know the exact numbers on those. We might never know those numbers.
I think we should know the numbers.
I think you've got that right.
Well, but there's been no distinction between prisoners of war and hostages. I mean, there are different convictions and conventions that apply to civilians and people in the military. And of course, everybody there must serve in the military. Some are active and others are not.
And also the piece that nobody else is talking about is that friendly fire piece that he talked about, that many of these Israelis could have gotten killed by the Israeli army or the Israeli response to what they saw. So he's saying, if I understand him correctly, that many of these killings were friendly fire killings from the Israelis themselves. Is that correct, Mr. Quigley?
Yeah, I think that is certainly
60 seconds, everyone.
Yeah.
Wow. Whew. Well, the things that we find out.
I have to hop off soon.
Sending you so much love. You can say hello to Dr. Gibbs before you go.
Good morning.
Hey, Dr. Gibbs.
Hello.
Good morning.
And Professor Quigley, you don't have to leave. I was just, I didn't want to impose. You could.
Oh, okay.
You're more than welcome to stay.
Okay.
If you want. I mean, really, you're more than welcome to.
Oh, I mean, you're going to continue this on the air?
I sure am. In 15 seconds, yes.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I'll stay on.
Fantastic, absolutely.
10 seconds.
Stand by. I just didn't want you to say, this woman told me I could stay 50 or 20 minutes, and she kept me up for an hour.
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Monday, October 30th, 2023, one day before Halloween, one day before our first snowfall in Chicago. Ouch! WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I am Santita Jackson. I'm so pleased that Professor John Quigley, Professor Emeritus of International Law at Ohio State, will stay with us so that we can get some more clarity, Dr. Gibbs, because Dwight McKee, of course, Bryce Green had to leave, but to go to class, pursuing that PhD so he can join your ranks. Professor Quigley gave us some information. He just made some distinctions about the death toll. The death toll, horrifically, is 1,400 on the Israeli side, 8,000 plus on the Palestinian side. It's just too many people. That's almost 10,000 people, everybody. But he said, wait a minute, and I don't want to put words in your mouth because you're here, Professor Quigley, because Dwight McKee asked you for some clarification. And the reason I'm asking you to reiterate this for the third time is because what you've said is something that has not been put in corporate media. I mean, it's just something you said, no, there's a distinction with all of these deaths. We're looking at 1,400 Israelis dead as 1,400 civilians. And you said, no, that's not quite true. Could you explain, Professor Quigley?
Yes, well, Dwight had a good part of it because he referred to reporting in a newspaper in Israel called Haaretz, which does much better reporting than any of the major media in the United States on the war, and is much more critical of the government of Israel than the major media in the United States. And what they have reported is that the total number killed was probably not 1,400, as is widely repeated as if it's fact in our media, but it's probably closer to something between 900 and 1,000. And of those, a substantial number were military. The Israeli government has actually posted the names of 309 of those killed who were military. And under the laws of warfare, killing military is unfortunately legitimate. And the Gaza Strip was invaded by Israel in 1967. It's been occupied since that time. So this is a continuing war. So when Hamas kills Israeli military, it is acting in defense of Palestine. So that number of people, yes, they were killed, but those were killings that would be considered legitimate under the rules of warfare. And then with respect to the remaining number, one has to ask how they were killed. And it seems that the Israeli military, which was not well prepared for this operation by Hamas, began firing at the areas where they saw Hamas combatants. And those were areas where there were civilians, because the Hamas combatants were there for the of kidnapping people to take them back to Gaza in order to exchange them for Palestinians who are in jail in Israel. I mean, those are people that Israel has jailed for, many of them for long periods of time, many of them without a criminal trial, but under a rule they have in the legal system of Israel that allows detention based on unstated suspicion. So that's what the Hamas people were doing, but and that is not lawful under the laws of warfare. But that meant that you had Hamas mingling in with civilian population, and the Israeli military fired at those areas. So it's not clear how many of the civilians who were killed by the Israeli military. And when you take all of that into account, the number of civilians actually killed by Hamas people is probably a couple hundred, and many of those may have been killed because they got in the way, unfortunately, when the Hamas people were going after Israeli military. So the picture of 1,400 being killed, and that this being the largest mass killing of Jews since the Holocaust, and that is a basis for destroying Gaza and killing thousands of people there. That whole narrative has been debunked by an Israeli newspaper.
Dr. David Gibbs, your thoughts? I mean, that's just
I haven't actually seen the Haaretz article.
Mm-hmm.
I can't comment on the numbers. I would say that generally, I'm sure there were Israelis killed, first in the crossfire, but also by Israeli forces, what's called friendly fire. That always occurs in war. And, probably the Israelis I wouldn't be surprised if they're overstating the numbers that were actually killed by Hamas. That wouldn't surprise me at all. And yes, there's no doubt there were a sizable number of Israeli soldiers killed. Again, I don't know what that number is because I haven't actually seen the Haaretz article, but it's a matter of record that there were attacks on Israeli army bases. I believe they fully overran or partially overran at least one army base. And so, yes, I mean, the numbers here of 1,400 or at least have to be evaluated carefully. Let's just put it that way, and not taken as face value. What I do see is a larger picture, though, a larger image here of David and Goliath. And the question is, who is the David and who is the Goliath? And Israel has always been portrayed. Let me say, again, this is an important distinction because it's in human nature to have a naturally sympathy for David in situations like that, where you have an overwhelming force and some much smaller force opposing an overwhelming force. Of course, it's human nature to have at least some sympathy for the David, irrespective of circumstances. And the question is, who is the David and who is the Goliath in this situation? Israel and its supporters have always tried to portray Israel as David amidst this gigantic Arab colossus that's hostile to it, valiantly defending itself. But, I mean, if you look carefully at what's going on in Gaza, it's exactly the opposite. It's always been the opposite, at least with Gaza. Israel has diplomatic relations with the largest neighboring Arab state, Egypt, which is collaborating with them, in fact, in blockading Gaza. They have diplomatic relations with Jordan. Syria is immobilized in a civil war. Many Arab states are basically de facto, or were until the Gaza war, moving towards normalization with Israel. And you have the people of Gaza, 2.3 million, with the tiniest of militaries and a minuscule military capability, facing off against a modern, very advanced military force, Israel, backed by the might of what is still by far the largest military power in the world, the United States. And so I think you are really, the image, I have to be blunt on this, the sort of public relations image Israel has been promoting for a long time, and is still promoting Israel as a victim in these attacks. And certainly they were a victim, at least, again, even if we disagree with the exact numbers, the attacks against civilians, whatever the numbers were horrible and deserve condemnation.
Absolutely.
What Israel is doing now is on a vastly larger scale, and will kill vastly larger numbers of civilians. And there's the larger context of what led to the October 7th attacks, the horrific conditions in which Israel has kept Gaza for so long, the larger question of the Nakba that led to the creation of the Palestinian refugee crisis in 1948. All of this has to be taken into account and basically put into the context of the October 7th massacres. And again, some of them certainly were massacres, irrespective of the qualifications that have been noted. You do have the issue that if one wants to put this in terms of David and Goliath, Israel is the Goliath, and Palestinian people in Gaza are the David.
Call us, excuse me, at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. But also when you hear Dwight McKee and Professor Quigley and Dr. Gibbs, the language that is being used to describe Palestinians, it's chilling. And, human animals, really talking about eliminating them, it is just stunning. And no one is speaking out about that. I mean, it's not in the best of anyone's tradition, and I want people to be very, very careful. I think we have to all be very, very careful because all Israelis don't feel this way. All Jewish people don't feel this way. And I'm worried about the blowback on our Jewish brothers and sisters because, I saw what happened in the airport in Russia. I watched the comments after articles. There's just a lot that's beginning to float out here that's really foul and dangerous for everybody. And, but one child is killed every 15 minutes in Gaza. Dwight, come on. One child every 15 minutes, human animals. Wow. Who does that?
Well, I would like to hear the context for the whole arrangement between the Palestinians and the Israelis. I know that a lot of the justification for the Israeli state is a result of the Holocaust, but Israel was set up in 1917, which preceded the Holocaust by 30 years, 40 years. And then the other pretext for it, or the other basis for it, is the fact that the Bible declares it to be a theocracy that God had promised to the Jews, but many of the Zionists were atheists. And so I know Dr. Quigley has a real handle on how the state was created in the first place and the justification for this David and Goliath relationship. And I'd really like to hear some of those pieces.
Professor Quigley?
That's a very important aspect of the whole situation, and it's absolutely accurate that it does go back to 1917. When Britain came into control of Palestine, and for reasons related to its own self-interest, decided to promote the idea of a what they call the national home for the Jewish people of the world in Palestine, which was a crazy thing to do because you had a population that was 90% Arab. There were at that point about 10% of the population that were Jewish. But to say a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, that was something that was promoted by the Zionist organization, which was based in Europe. And their aim was to take over the entire country and have it be controlled by them, and to bring in Jews from Europe in order to populate it, and in that context, somehow to figure out how to get rid of the Arabs. So the project of getting rid of the Arabs of Palestine does go back to the time of the First World War. In 1937, the Zionist organization actually formed a committee to see what they could do to get the Arabs out of Palestine. They called it the Transfer Committee. Transfer was a kind of euphemism for getting rid of the Arabs. And they explored all kinds of schemes like buying up agricultural land in Iraq and getting Arabs to move to it. But then in 1948, they had the military capability to get Arabs out by force. And they did that and got rid of about 750,000, many of whom wound up in, guess where, the Gaza Strip. So this project of getting rid of the Arabs has been on the agenda for a very long time. So when some of the people that I know in the northern part of Gaza heard the warning by the IDF telling them to move south, they heard that in the context of everything that has happened since 1917. So when you point to 1917, I think you've really got your finger on the right button.
Why don't you respond? Someone, David Gibbs, Professor David Gibbs, Professor Quickly, Dwight McKee. Karen Lene asks this question. It's a fair question. She said, I'd love to hear a balanced discourse. What was the initial intent of the attack on the Jews? And to be fair, Karen, we have a balancing discourse. I'm always going to seek to be fair. What you have seen in corporate media has been most unfair. You've only heard one perspective, Goliath's perspective. You've not heard the truth. You've heard someone's experience. Truth is neutral. There's no my truth, your truth. There is only the truth. And we've not heard any of it. If you only hear Israeli mothers crying, you don't hear Palestinian mothers crying, you're missing the truth. Period. If you don't see people by the millions marching in the streets all over the world, asking for a ceasefire and a peaceful resolution, all of this, you're not hearing the truth. So what you're hearing is not just a balanced discourse here. It's a balancing one. I'm attempting to balance what you're getting in corporate media, which is not the truth, because it's not giving you a global view of this. Dwight?
Well, also, Santita, you can't have a balanced discourse on an imbalanced reality. And the fact of the matter, what Dr. Quigley is explaining is the reality of how the situation came to be. And it was always an imposition by the Israelis on a people state that they had really nothing to do with other than by declarations that they end up taking over and purging the people that was there. Now, you can't balance that unless you lie and say that somehow that, the Palestinians deserve that, or the Israelis had, the Zionists, it was Zionists, not just Israelis, had the right to do that, by whatever reason. You just can't impose a balance where the reality is contrary to it being a same situation. It really is a David and Goliath reality, as the professor said, as quickly the other professor said.
Well, Professor Quigley, what about this balanced discourse that she's calling for? that she doesn't feel that we're having here. What do you say to that?
Well, I think there needs to be a balanced discourse. I mean, in part, it's how we characterize things. The caller said, I think she referred to it as an attack on the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
I would not characterize what happened on the 7th of October as an attack on the Jews. It was, as I've said, a military action with the aim of degrading some of the Israeli operations in southern Israel, and also of taking people back into Gaza. So it had a specific objective, part of which was lawful, part of which was not lawful, but I wouldn't characterize it as an attack on the Jews, because that feeds into that's not accurate, and it feeds into the narrative that the Jews have to respond and they can kill all the Palestinians to do so.
Dr. Gibbs, what say you?
I think one of the narratives of Israel since it was created was that it's a safe haven for Jews. They can be protected from attack. And that, you had pogroms in Europe, as they had for centuries, if you had a Holocaust, as they had, of course, during World War II, at least be a sanctuary where Jews could go to. And it was a place of safety for Jews. It was an element of security for Jews. And I think what we're seeing now is exactly the opposite. First of all, Israeli policies, and second of all, frankly, the existence of Israel has been very destabilizing for Jews, to some extent worldwide. I mean, we saw a recent attack on Jews in an airport in Dagestan in Russia. And again, it's horrific, and one should, of course, condemn those types of attacks. But they occur in a context, and the context is one in which you have a war in the Middle East, which Israel bears, by any objective standards, primary responsibility for that war. And just because they created the conditions that led to it over many decades. And, does this create a safety for the Jews? No, it creates the opposite. It creates insecurity for Jews. First of all, for Israel, Jews living in Israel are living in insecurity. We just saw massive evidence of that. Jews all over the world are made less secure by these policies. And again, we're seeing evidence of that. Really the narrative of Israel is that it's a sanctuary for Jews is just the opposite. I might add something else, which is that educated Israelis have been for many years now been acquiring second passports. Jews of German descent, I believe of Polish descent, if I'm not mistaken, are eligible for German or Polish passports and therefore EU citizenship. Israelis who are able to do so are acquiring them at a rapid pace, which indicates they want to parachute. If things continue, they want to be able to leave Israel, with the implication that Israel isn't all that secure. Maybe places like Germany, ironically, is probably a more secure place for Jews than Israel is. And so, the whole narrative of this breaks down. I think any reasonable look at this from the standpoint just purely of the Jewish people is that the Jewish people would have been better off if Israel had never been created in the first place.
Hey, everybody. I'm gonna get some closing thoughts on the other side of the break from this wonderful panel. We're having a discourse, a balanced discourse, giving you information that you just don't have. And so, and I'm unapologetic about that, because I have argued long for Israeli security and Palestinian justice being married to one another. You're not going to have one without the other. And we all need each other. The Bible tells us that, you have a seat at the table in the presence of your enemy, because your enemy, your opponent, is God's child too. So we're going to have to grow up in our politics and figure out a way to get along. Thank you, Rodney King. Figure out a way, but you have to do justice. One Gazan child is killed every 15 minutes. Now, that ought to be unacceptable to you. 96% of their water is undrinkable. That ought to be unacceptable to you. A war crime is being perpetrated against these people right now. They don't have water. They don't have electricity. They cannot flush their toilets. Hospitals are being shut down, which means incubators. Babies are dying. More than 50% of those who've been killed, more than 3/4, have been women and children. You don't do that. So come on, everybody. We've got some work to do, because it's your money that's allowing it to happen. And that is most un American. And we're shutting down discourse in America. That is most un American. Hey, take your money out the university. Go on. It shouldn't be tied to you and your political views anyway. So go on about your business. But really? You want to shut down discourse in America? In America? No, you need to take that someplace else. Because we don't do that here. We're not supposed to do that here. It's not right. You're not supposed to pursue this young woman who signed this letter at NYU, a promising law student. You're not supposed to put her under investigation. You're not supposed to do that to the Harvard students. You're not supposed to do that. We don't do that here. Take that someplace else. On November 5th, I will be hosting Congressman Jonathan Jackson's town hall meeting at the South Shore Cultural Center. You do not want to miss it. We're going to have snacks first, lunch first, and then we're going to get right into it. Some of the great issues of the day will be discussed. Cannot wait to talk about that with you. I'm going to have him on before the week is out to talk about what he's going to talk about on November 5th. But stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. I'm going to get some closing thoughts from Dwight McKee, Dr. David Gibbs, and Professor John Quigley about what's happening in the Middle East right now. Sending you much love, everybody. Can't wait to be with you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. Thank you, Devin. Well, is there anything that has been left unsaid, Dr. David Gibbs?
Well, I'll just sum up by saying there's a question of balance here. And yes, we do need balanced discussion by acknowledging the situation in the Middle East is unbalanced, as Dwight McGee said. The reality is unbalanced. And it is a fact that far more civilians are being killed by the Israelis than have been killed by Hamas, irrespective of how you want to tally the numbers that have occurred on October 7th. And so the reality is imbalanced, and that needs to be acknowledged. And I think that what we're not getting is a balanced discussion here, and a vitriolic attack on people basically who criticize Israel. Sometimes, let me say that you should condemn both killing of civilians with both sides, acknowledging nevertheless that Israel has done more, significantly more than Hamas has done. And people who only condemn Israeli attacks and not the Hamas attacks, I think are wrong and should be criticized for that. But nevertheless, the only criticism we're getting, or at least the only real attack we're getting here, is on those who basically criticize Israel. Those who basically criticize Hamas and only Hamas and justify the Israeli attacks and sort of whitewash the Israeli killing of civilians and the Israeli blockade of Gaza and all the things that led to these things, they're subject to very little attack. You're not getting sort of campaigns to get fired students from Harvard who, in a very unbalanced way, supported Israeli attacks without acknowledging the massive human cost of those attacks. You're not getting that. So I think what we need here is a much more balanced discussion and freedom of discussion, freedom to do it without retribution, without fear of losing one's job or being expelled from school or publicly vilified. I think that's the first order of business in a democracy, is open discussion on this topic.
Well, because that really is an issue right now. That is, it's a wound that is opening wider and wider and wider. These kids are being told that they're not going to get hired for jobs once they graduate from school. That's what they're being told. And they are being pushed, their names are being pushed through networks so that they cannot get jobs. You can lose any job. I could lose mine. Fortunately, I own the show and I got to get out here and hunt and get sponsors. But then some people don't want to sponsor this show. A whole lot don't, because of what I bring people on, like Professor Quigley, Dr. Gibbs, and Dwight McKee, and Bryce Green, and on and on and on, Medea Benjamin and Jim Zogby, and we can Phyllis Bennis, all these people. I want them to have a platform because they can't get on MSNBC, even they can't. Some of the most credible people in the world, they can't get on MSNBC. They can't get on ABC, CBS, Fox. They can't. When you want to talk peace, you get locked out. So you want to say, well, you're being very careful in this conversation. I know, because I have skin in the game. I have to be. What happened to these Harvard students is what happened to me 40 years with Harvard, on the Middle East, on my father's politics. And I backed down not 1 inch. He was correct. We were correct. And if you think that I'm going to disavow my father just so that I can get a Harvard degree, you're nuts. You're out of your mind. But that's what's happening to these kids right now. Right now in America, they cannot speak out. No one can have an opinion here. And Dr. Gibbs, that is an awful thing, and it's most un-American. And we've seen it happen before, but now Dwight McKee, Professor Quigley is happening to white kids, and they're like, "Oh my gosh!" I mean, to white, it's like they're like, "I can't believe this is happening in America." Dwight,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, now feeling the wrath of the establishment against themselves if they have what they see as a moral position. But the real tragedy of this, Santita, I think, is that a lot of the moral imperative of the Jews, the Jewish people, is based on what they suffered in the Holocaust, which was a horrible situation and should never, never happen again. I would hate to see them lose much of that moral authority by inflicting a Holocaust on another people for dubious reasons, and that's what it seems like is happening now.
what do you mean?
And so all of the sympathy and the empathy that they had gained from having survived the Holocaust, and it being such a terrible imposition of grief and sorrow and death, that they were able to give real substance and legitimacy to their plight.
Mm-hmm.
I feel is maybe lost if they themselves end up inflicting a Holocaust on another people. And it seems as if they are, on the brink of that. And worldwide, a lot of the sympathy and the love that people had developed for them as a people who risen above the ashes is being lost because many people don't see Netanyahu's policies that much different than the Nazi policies that were imposed upon the Jews in Germany in 1941.
And honestly, that is a yardstick, Professor Quigley and Dr. Gibbs, that people live by. Claudette Colvin was a young lady who she was 14. She sat on the front of the bus. She refused to move to the back of the bus several months before Rosa Parks, but because of some things in her own background, they said, no, Rosa Parks will be better because we cannot attack her on any personal level. This is a woman whose personal reputation was above reproach. Claudette Colvin was a very nice young girl who made a couple of errors, and that happens, but we were living in far less forgiving times, far less understanding times then. And that happens a lot. And you got to be very, very careful, Professor Quigley, not to cross that line, not to become the hurt, not to become as hurtful as the hurt that has occurred to you. And I'm concerned about that too. And I'm concerned about the blind spot, that I see a lot of folks have. It's like, wait a minute, you're calling people human animals. Wait, whoa. Hold on, you can't do that. You don't have the right to do that. And officially doing it, officially.
Mm-hmm.
In your government bodies, you are doing this. You are saying that. It's another kind of genocide, quite frankly. Professor Quigley.
Yeah, no, you're right. Government leaders, they may think things like that, but they shouldn't say them out loud because that turns them into policy. And that means that these Israeli, reservists who are going into Gaza think it's okay to kill anybody that they see, or to consider that anybody they see is a threat, and kill them on that basis. I do say, Santita, I have something else to run to here, so I'm going to have to say goodbye.
What would you like to say before you go?
Yeah. Well, I think you all are on the right track, and you're raising issues that are not being dealt with in the mass media and that issues that, if properly understood, people would not be supporting what the president is doing.
Wow, that's a whole lot, Professor John Quigley. I cannot wait to have you back on the show. I cannot wait to have you back on the show. I'm going to get some closing thoughts from Dwight McKee and Professor David Gibbs in just a hot second. Blessings to you, Professor Quigley. Cannot wait to have you back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Dwight McKee, what are your closing thoughts? What's your takeaway from today's discussion?
Well, what I appreciate Dr. Gibbs and Dr. Quigley and their objectivity in all of this. I think it's important that people have all of the facts. And up to now, many of the facts have been sifted out by mainstream media. What I like people to know is that there has to be a consistency in the love for humanity, that there's responsibility as we people who declare ourselves to be humane and caring, that does not cover one group of people, that's consistent, that every child dying is a child dying, and every mother, being killed is a mother being killed, and that these people belong to somebody and are mourned by somebody and are loved by somebody. Mm-hmm. And so we just can't make a distinction and say that these people are more human and deserve to live and prosper, and these other people are subhuman and deserve to be destroyed, which is what's happening to them. We have to be morally consistent and ethically consistent. And I think that the facts would help take us there. And I think it's important that the facts be told.
Professor Gibbs?
Well, yes, I agree that basically one of the things we need is the facts. And one of the responsibilities here is the American media, especially the prestige media, the New York Times, the Washington Post, have been doing a lamentable job in reporting this issue and the war in Ukraine as well, I should add, as kind of almost advocacy journalism for one side. And that really has to stop. We need to get back to the idea of objective journalism that presents the full context and doesn't just basically give the sense that, Israeli deaths are what really should elicit our sympathy, and Palestinian deaths are some vague things that occur in the background and don't really count, which is the message I'm getting to some extent from the U.S. media at this time. And there needs to be just the facts presented with unvarnished frankness. I should add, it is ironic that you are getting probably better reporting in Israel. It's far from objective in Israel. I'm not suggesting it is, but it's better in Israel. Places like Haaretz, and despite the political context of Israel, despite considerable formal censorship in Israel, Haaretz is probably doing a better job of this.
I read them every day. I read them every day.
I'm sure you do.
Just to get a sense of, okay, now wait a minute, what's going on here? I read Mondoweiss.
Yeah.
And I realize Mondoweiss, they tip way left, but they don't do it sacrificing truth. I read the Forward, I read Tablet, I read everything, quite frankly, because I want to hear different perspectives. I worked at Fox News, okay, and I learned a whole lot. First of all, what I learned from my father years ago, Dr. Gibbs, and Dwight McKee, because Dwight was with my parents, I think, when you were about 14 or 15, Dwight.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that and you can attest to this, with Reverend and Mrs. Jackson, you're going to meet everybody. I mean, your enemy, Reverend's going to be nice to them. I mean, and they end up personally liking him. Is that not true, Dwight? Am I exaggerating?
They at least depends on who they are.
I mean, yeah, of course, but at least they will respect him. Because they say,
they respect him.
They say, look, I don't agree with him, but I trust him. Roger Ailes said that about Reverend. He said, no, in a foxhole, I want him there. Why, Roger? He said, because he's trustworthy. There's nothing I've told him, Santita. I said, I've known him 50 years. There's nothing I've told him that I've ever heard again. He said, I can't say that about almost anyone. and you want to be trustworthy. And I will say, and that's what he is. I mean, you have to pass a character test with people. And I just think that we have got to, whether it's an injustice committed against an Israeli by a Palestinian or a Palestinian, an injustice committed by a Palestinian against an Israeli, you just ought to say stop. That's why you need a ceasefire and have really the brunt of injustice been borne by the Palestinians? Absolutely. And that doesn't mean that you don't like the Jewish community. No. But this has all been wrong. And it's just never been right. And no one's ever known peace. And now you have members of the Jewish community in Israel who are trying to parachute out of there. What? And you just gonna leave this mess behind? Oh, no, 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 you can't do that. You're talking about using tactical nuclear weapons. Whenever you drop a nuke, everybody all over the world feels it, because guess what? The same air moves all around the world. I mean, the thinking here, Professor Gibbs, to me is just off. It's not crazy. It's off, and it's evil, and it's mean. The dehumanizing of these people, calling them human animals, talking about their elimination, on and on and on. It's just wrong. And they're not being called out on that. And that to me is wrong. It's immoral.
I think one of the things you're seeing also is a kind of irrationality on the part of the Israeli leadership. And I would say also irrationality on the part of the United States in backing it, in that it should be very obvious just forget about the larger picture from the Israeli standpoint. There's no military solution here that's at all viable. That should have been obvious for a long time, and it's very obvious now. What is needed is a political solution that takes into account the rights of the Palestinians, something Israel has been fundamentally opposed to. And that's the source of the problem. And the United States has enormous leverage over Israel, and they could simply impose, if they wish, a political settlement here, or at least the need to achieve a political settlement and to eliminate the military option, because that's unworkable. The United States have that ability to do that, and they simply refuse to do that.
Hold on 1 second.
It's terrible. It's terrible for American security.
Let me interrupt you right here. You're saying that America has the power to shut this down. I mean, because the American military walked away last week, and they said, "Look, you all own this." I guess they came across in the American media as, well, they're independent and we're powerless to do anything to shut this down. You're saying that's not true.
It's ridiculous. The United States is backstopping Israel completely. There's the yearly subsidy that Israel has been getting since the early 1970s for over half a century, now greatly augmented in the context of the war, the special aid package that I believe designated $10 billion for the Israelis, and presumably more to come if they need it. There's the two aircraft carrier task forces placed off Israel's shores in defense of Israel, clearly, as a pro-Israeli gesture. There is really American bases all over the Middle East that now are activated and ready to act in Israel's interest. The United States dispatched a military aid delegation led by a 3-star general to give whatever advice they can to the Israelis on any invasion of Gaza that takes place. Glynn, that's right, Lieutenant General Glynn. And, so the United States is up to its ears in this operation. And, the United States could say that, look, you accept these terms or we cut you off now. And Israel would have to accept the terms. And the United States has never been willing to do that. And it's certainly not willing to do that now. And instead is just backing Israel to the hilt. I think they're giving some careful advice that Israel should watch its step and not do a full ground invasion. I don't think they're even going to insist on that. And so I think that basically what you have is Israel is being given carte blanche to do pretty much whatever it wants. And the United States is doing nothing about it, even though there are lots of things the U.S. could do. To claim the U.S. is powerless is utterly ridiculous.
Well, I don't think that Netanyahu wants a political solution. I think he wants a financial solution.
Yep.
I think that he wants to use this as a pretext for ethnic cleansing and genocide in order to take the whole country and create a theocracy in that country, and it become a Jewish state, non-democratic, integrated state. I think he wants to create a particular Jewish state and it be a theocracy created around it. And and I see him on the brink of that. And I think they're really trying to clear Gaza to bring the Jews in from the Ukraine when they have to buck. In that situation is my theory about that. But I think just like Hitler was looking for a final solution, I think he's looking for a final solution. That's the irony of all of this to me.
That's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing. Nobody's going to win. They're going to lose. Oh, boy. Well, your final thoughts, Professor Gibbs, before we go today. It seems like every day it's something new to report on this, and it just gets worse.
It does get worse, yes. Unfortunately, I think that there is nothing is going to happen quickly here. Israel has said it's going to be a long offensive. Long is not good from the standpoint of the Israelis. It's certainly even worse from the standpoint of the Palestinians. I agree with Dwight McGee. I'm sure there's a very strong strain of opinion in the Netanyahu government that the solution to this may be clearing out the people of Gaza completely, and then maybe replacing them with Israelis. I'm sure that's being discussed. I'd be very surprised if it weren't. And then creating, the ancient state of Israel, including the West Bank. That's openly being discussed among many members of the Netanyahu government as a sort of biblical prophecy and that kind of thing. Getting rid of maybe the Al-Aqsa Mosque and reconstructing the third ancient temple in Jerusalem. All of these things are being considered. And, they see this as an opportunity to do it. The problem is they're losing public support very rapidly. The reservoir of public support Israel has always had, particularly in the U.S. and Europe, which was augmented briefly by the October 7th attacks. They're going to lose that as this goes on, and as more and more horrific pictures emerge, and more horrific things emerge from the lips of Israeli officials about Palestinian animals and the like. All of this is going to erode support for Israel. It's going to also rearrange the global chessboard, and many countries will further more and more move away from the United States. Get a breakdown of what Tony Blinken called, quote unquote, the rules-based order, meaning the American-led order. This is all going to break. It's been breaking down already, and this is going to accelerate the loss of American power. And that seems to me is inexorable. And that's going to be one outcome of this. I'm very fearful of how this could expand. There are all sorts of imponderables here, possibly uprisings in Arab countries against their own governments, attacks on U.S. bases. Perhaps the U.S. would do something foolish like want to attack the Russians in Syria, leading to a war with Russia. There are all sorts of ways this could spin out of control and affect not only the security of Israel and Gaza, but the whole world. And I think basically what we need now, more than anything else, is a ceasefire and de-escalation.
Dwight McKee, your closing thoughts for today?
I think
There'll be something else to talk about before the end of the day.
I think he hits all the salient points, all of them. My fear is, though, they're going to try to rebuild the temple, and rebuilding the Jewish temple, they're going to have to tear down the mosque that's there now. And when they do that, it's going to create a religious war, a crusade, and all hell is going to break loose. And it's going to be the precursor to Armageddon. And I think we're right there, just about now. It's where this can go. Now, how much is the destiny of the world to go there, or how much that is with some prudence can be avoided, we're yet to see. But I think that if that scenario that Dr. Gibbs just outlined, if that happens, I think everything else is going to fall like dominoes.
Well, everybody, think about it. I keep bringing this up because we're in the midst of what could become World War III, and that's no exaggeration. I mean, do you think that's an exaggeration, Professor Gibbs?
No, I don't. Again, there's an issue of we have a localized conflict that could easily flare up into a global conflict very quickly, along the lines that I and Dwight have been saying. And so that is the picture we're discussing here. And again, we have the issue that several major players, including the United States, Israel, and Russia, are players in this game locally, and they have nuclear weapons. Iran could develop them probably in a short time. They don't have them yet, but they could develop them. And so the possibility of the use of nuclear weapons can't be ruled out in a situation like this. And again, that is the sort of thing that should make people very, very worried. And the world should insist that its security, the security of all the people in the world, are more important than America's desire to maintain its power in light of recent threats, and Israel's desire to maybe establish a third temple on the Al-Aqsa Mount, on the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The world's security is more important than those things. I think the world should have some say in this.
Absolutely. That's why we bring this up to you and bring the information before you. Do with it what you will, but really, my dog in the hunt is love and life and obedience to God's law. I mean, that's where I am on this, really. My grandmother Gertrude, before she died, maybe last 2 or 3 years of her life, she kept saying that there is one way, the right way, and that's it. Ain't no gray here. I didn't say there isn't. I said there ain't no gray here. Either you choose life or you choose killing. We've got to go another way, everybody. What we're doing is not right. One child being killed. These children are not just dying in Gaza. They're being killed. Can't use the passive voice when you're talking about all this death, or when you talk about anything. Israelis are killed and Palestinians are dead. No, Israelis are killed and Palestinians are killed, and it's wrong. Israeli voices for peace are being muted, and we're being muted over here in the United States, and it's wrong. So as you're talking about democracy, you're being undemocratic because you're not allowing people to speak. You're not allowing people to criticize. You're chasing kids out of school. You're telling them you're not going to hire them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is ridiculous. And you ought to be outraged by this. And if it's happening to kids who are trying to get through school, who are trying to get their jobs, or what about the kids who want to get into graduate school? How do you think that's going to impact them? Probably won't get in. Yeah, that's real. I've been through this before. And it's not right. It's just not right. But only heaven knows what will be built right in its place as we see all of this corruption. Because please, what? Jeffrey Epstein, had his thumbs on the scale at MIT. For what? I mean, really? Come on, everybody. All of this corruption that's out here, it's being laid. It is being uncovered for everybody, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But boy, is this tough. It's tough. Professor Gibbs, Dwight McKee, has there anything that has been left unsaid? Is there anything else that you all would like to say before we go?
I want to thank Dr. Gibbs for his contribution. I thought he was profound today.
Well, I think it's very kind of you to say that, Dwight. I always appreciate yours as well. Thank you very much. I guess I just one more thought I thought I'd add is that in addition to all the other security dangers we're seeing, is Russia should not be forgotten as a player in this game, and this very much links up with the war in Ukraine in a very direct way, and it's this. Putin announced recently that there'll be permanent patrols of MiG-31 planes armed with hypersonic missiles that are within range of the U.S. aircraft carriers. This is clearly a threat to the United States, and I think the issue here is a fear that the United States will attack Russian forces in Syria. There's the possibility of Russia becoming involved in this in a very direct way. And if the United States were so foolish as to attack Russian forces in Syria, which cannot be ruled out, that could lead to launches of these missiles against U.S. aircraft carriers. And yes, that would be World War III right there. And so, again, I do underscore the stakes are very high indeed. Again, not just for Israel and the Palestinians, but for the world here. And that must be taken into account and, underscore the gravity of what's going on.
Well, and there we have it. And Robert, I'm glad you feel this is a very informative show today. And when we're watching the numbers grow for people who are tuning in, and that's gratifying, maybe because we are bringing another perspective. And I hope that it's a sobering one. I want peace and love for everybody. And that's not Pollyanna-ish. I mean, that's God promised us that. It's our bad thinking that keeps us away from that. Remember that. And our bad actions, our bad decisions. We're the ones who are making bad decisions. God ain't made a mistake yet. God's incapable of that. God's incapable of lying, being unkind, being cruel, being unwise. Mm-mm. We're the ones who do all of that. And we're on the verge of blowing up the entire world. On what? On hubris, excessive pride, and arrogance. That's what this is. You want to talk about democracy? We don't have that. We don't have it. We have to make a decision about whether we want it or not. You don't talk to people that way. You don't treat people this way. So we've got to do better. Not do better, we got to do right. So there I go. My father has called me, so I've been summoned. I'm going to go with him to do his speech therapy, everybody. He's actually doing quite well with it right now, so I'm glad about that. But I'm sending you all much love. And hey, Alan from Tulsa, how you doing? Please tell people about the show, my sweet. Sending you much love today. Sending you much love, Professor Gibbs, Dwight McKee.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Good
Devin
talking to both of you.
Andrakis. Oh, always a joy. Always a joy. Always a joy. God bless you. And Morning Stars, I love you. And I'll see you November 5th at Jonathan Jackson, Congressman Jonathan Jackson's town hall. It ought to be great. Oof. I can't wait. I'll be moderating. Let me get myself together for that. Love you. Bye-bye.